Jake Harrison sat in the cold metal cell and stared at the strange purple walls around him. 3 months had passed since his ship was blown apart during the battle at Europa Station. 3 months since he watched his crew die while trying to save the transport ships full of families running from the war. 3 months since the tall silver aliens captured him and brought him to this massive ship floating somewhere in deep space. The human warrior had been a Marine for 10 years before joining the space fleet. He knew how to handle pain and fear. He knew how to stay strong when things looked bad. But sitting in this alien prison was different from anything he had faced before. The walls seemed to watch him. The air tasted strange. Even the gravity felt wrong under his feet. Jake was thinking about his old home on Earth when the cell door made a soft hissing sound and slid open. 4 tall guards walked in. They looked like humans, but were much taller with smooth silver skin that seemed to glow in the dim light. Their eyes were large and bright purple. They wore dark blue uniforms that looked like they were made from some kind of flexible metal. The guards did not speak to him. They just pointed their strange weapons at him and waited. Jake knew what they wanted. He stood up slowly and held out his hands. The guards put heavy metal chains around his wrists and ankles. The chains felt warm against his skin and seemed to buzz with some kind of energy that made his muscles feel weak. They led him through long hallways filled with more purple light. The ship was huge. Jake had been on many space vessels, but nothing like this. The walls curved in ways that hurt his eyes to look at. Strange symbols glowed and moved across flat surfaces like living things. He could hear soft music or maybe voices singing somewhere far away, but could never tell where the sounds came from. After walking for what felt like an hour, they stopped at a large door. The door was different from the others Jake had seen. This one was made of something that looked like black glass but moved like water. As they got closer, it simply melted away and showed them a room beyond. The room was enormous. The ceiling was so high Jake could not see it in the purple shadows above. Strange plants with silver leaves grew from the walls. In the center of the room was a raised platform made of the same black glass material as the door. On the platform sat a chair that looked more like a throne. In the throne sat the most beautiful and terrifying creature Jake had ever seen. She was tall like the guards, but different. Her skin was paler silver and seemed to shine with its own light. Her hair was long and white like fresh snow and moved gently even though there was no wind in the room. She wore a flowing dress that changed colors as she moved from deep blue to purple to silver, but it was her eyes that made Jake forget how to breathe. They were the same purple as the guards, but much brighter, and seemed to look right through him to see things he did not even know about himself. When their eyes met, Jake felt something strange happen in his chest. It was like being hit by lightning, but without any pain. Just a sudden shock that made his heart beat faster and his head feel dizzy. The alien princess stood up from her throne and walked down the steps toward him. Each step she took made a soft musical sound against the floor. The guards moved aside and let her approach. Jake tried to look away from her eyes but found that he could not. Something was pulling his attention to her like a magnet pulls metal. When she was close enough to touch him, she stopped and tilted her head to one side like she was trying to solve a puzzle. She reached out one hand toward his face but did not quite touch him. Jake felt warmth from her skin even with the space between them. Princess Zara had interrogated many prisoners during the war. She was good at reading minds and finding the information her people needed. Her telepathic powers were stronger than most Valerians, and she could usually break through any mental defenses in a few minutes. But something was wrong with this human. When she tried to enter his thoughts, she felt resistance like she had never experienced before. She closed her eyes and focused her power on breaking through whatever was blocking her from reading his mind. The effort made her head hurt, but she pushed harder. She had to know what made this particular human so special. Her scouts had told her stories about his fighting that seemed impossible. How he had held off an entire squadron of Valerian fighters by himself. How he had saved 3 transport ships full of civilians while his own ship was falling apart around him. Jake felt something pressing against his thoughts, like invisible fingers trying to get inside his head. The feeling was not painful, but it was strange and frightening. He tried to push the presence away, but it kept coming back stronger. Then suddenly images began flooding his mind. He saw a great city made of crystal and light. He saw two figures, standing together on a balcony looking out at stars that formed patterns he had never seen. He saw battles fought with weapons that shot pure energy. He saw ceremonies with hundreds of beings from different worlds all celebrating something wonderful. Most strange of all, he saw himself and the alien princess, but they looked different, older, wearing clothes from some other time and place. Princess Zara gasped and stumbled backward. The visions were coming to her too, but they were much stronger and more detailed than anything she had ever experienced during a mind reading. She saw the same crystal city but from different angles. She saw the same two figures on the balcony and realized with shock that one of them had her face, while the other looked exactly like the human prisoner standing in front of her. The images kept coming faster and faster, lifetimes of memories that belonged to neither of them, but somehow felt completely real. Promises made under alien moons, battles fought side by side against enemies that no longer existed, a love that had lasted across time and space and death. Itself, both Jake and Princess Zara collapsed at the same time. The psychic feedback from their connected visions was too much for either of them to handle. The guards rushed forward to help the princess, while Jake lay on the floor gasping and trying to understand what had just happened to him. Dr. Lisa Carter was brought to the throne room an hour later. She was a human scientist who had been captured during the same battle as Jake. The Valerians kept her alive because her knowledge of human biology was useful to them. When she saw Jake lying unconscious on the floor and the alien princess in the same condition, she knew something very unusual had occurred. The Valerian medical team let her examine both of them with her portable scanner. What she found made no sense according to everything she knew about human and alien biology. Their brain patterns were synchronized. Their heartbeats had matched up perfectly. Most impossible of all their quantum energy signatures were harmonically aligned in a way that should have been completely impossible. Lisa had read theoretical papers about quantum entanglement between conscious beings, but had never believed such a thing could really happen. Yet here was proof lying right in front of her. Somehow, the human warrior and the alien princess had become connected on a level deeper than anything science had yet discovered. When Jake finally woke up, the first thing he saw was Princess Zara sitting on the floor beside him. Her purple eyes were open and staring at him with an expression of wonder and confusion. Neither of them spoke, but they both knew that something had changed forever. The war between their peoples suddenly seemed like a small thing compared to the mystery of what had just happened between them. Princess Zara could not sleep after what had happened with the human prisoner. She lay in her chambers, staring at the ceiling while her mind replayed the strange visions over and over. The images felt more real than her own memories. The face of the human warrior kept appearing in her thoughts, and each time she saw it, her heart would beat faster and her skin would feel warm. She had never felt anything like this before. Valerian emotions were usually calm and controlled. They did not experience the wild feelings that other species seemed to have. But something about Jake Harrison made all of her careful control disappear like smoke in the wind. The next morning, Princess Zara went to see her grandmother. Oracle Myra was the oldest and wisest of all Valerians. She had lived for over 800 years and had seen things that were now only stories in old books. If anyone could explain what had happened during the interrogation, it would be her. Oracle Myra lived in the deepest part of the great ship in rooms that had not changed for centuries. The walls were covered with ancient symbols that glowed softly in the darkness. Strange crystals hung from the ceiling and made soft musical sounds when the air moved around them. The old woman sat in the center of the room on a cushion that seemed to float a few inches above the floor. Princess Zara knelt before her grandmother and told her everything that had happened. She described the visions and the strange connection she had felt with the human warrior. She explained how her telepathic powers had failed for the first time in her life. Oracle Myra listened without speaking, and her ancient eyes grew wider with each detail. When the princess finished her story, Oracle Myra was quiet for a long time. Finally, she stood up and walked to a wall covered with symbols that were older than the Valerian space empire. She touched several of the symbols, and they began to glow brighter. Words appeared in the air written in letters of pure light. The old woman read the ancient text carefully and then turned back to her granddaughter with an expression of amazement and fear. She told Princess Zara that what she had experienced was called the Eternal Bond. It was mentioned in the oldest prophecies but had not occurred for over 1,000 years. The bond connected two souls across all time and space and made them part of each other forever. Oracle. Myra explained that the bond usually happened between Valerians, but the ancient texts spoke of times when it could occur between different species. When this happened, it was a sign that great changes were coming. The bonded pair would become bridges between their peoples and help bring peace where there had been war. But the oracle also told her granddaughter about the darker side of the prophecy. The eternal bond could only be completed if both people accepted it willingly. If either one rejected the connection, both would die as their souls tore apart from each other. There was no middle path. They had to choose complete acceptance or certain death. Princess Zara felt cold fear run through her body when she heard this. She barely knew the human warrior. How could she make such a choice about someone who was supposed to be her enemy? But even as she thought this, she realized that part of her already knew Jake Harrison better than she knew herself. The visions had shown her his courage and his kindness and his deep love for the people he protected. Meanwhile, Jake was having his own struggles with what had happened. Dr. Lisa Carter had been allowed to visit him in his cell to check on his health after the incident. She brought her scanner and took readings of his brain activity and heart rate. What she found worried her greatly. Lisa told Jake that his body was changing in ways she could not fully understand. His nervous system was developing new pathways that looked similar to Valerian brain patterns. His heart was beating in a rhythm that matched some kind of alien frequency. Most frightening of all, his quantum signature was becoming unstable in ways that could be very dangerous. Jake listened to all of this, but found it hard to care about the technical details. All he could think about was Princess Zara, and the way her purple eyes had looked at him with such surprise and recognition. He kept remembering the visions of fighting beside her against unknown enemies. He remembered the feeling of being complete when she was near him. The human warrior had always been practical and logical. He made decisions based on facts and training and experience. But this situation was beyond anything his training had prepared him for. How could he trust feelings about someone he had just met? How could he believe in visions that showed impossible things? Dr. Carter could see that Jake was struggling with more than just the physical changes. She sat down next to him in the cell and spoke quietly about what she thought was happening. She told him that her readings suggested some kind of deep connection had formed between him and the alien princess. She said that the connection seemed to be getting stronger, whether he wanted it to or not. Princess Zara was facing pressure from her own people about the situation. Her uncle Prince Corvin had heard about the incident during the interrogation and was demanding answers. He came to her chambers with several members of the High Council and insisted that she explain why she had collapsed while questioning a human prisoner. Prince Corvin was ambitious and had always resented that his brother the Emperor had daughters instead of sons. He saw the princess as weak and unsuited for leadership. The idea that she might have formed some kind of connection with a human enemy gave him the excuse he had been looking for to challenge her position. The prince accused Princess Zara of being influenced by human mental powers. He claimed that Jake Harrison must be some kind of psychic weapon sent to corrupt Valerian leaders. He demanded that the human be executed immediately before he could cause more damage. Princess Zara tried to explain about the eternal bond and the ancient prophecies, but Prince Corvin dismissed her words as fantasy and delusion. The other council members were divided. Some believed the princess and wanted to study the situation more carefully. Others agreed with Prince Corvin that the human was dangerous and should be destroyed. The argument grew heated, and Princess Zara realized that her uncle was using this situation to make a play for power. He had never accepted her father's rule, and had been looking for any excuse to challenge the royal family. The connection with Jake Harrison was giving him exactly what he needed. Emperor Thane was away from the ship leading a diplomatic mission to the outer colonies. Communication with him would take days because of the distances involved. Princess Zara was on her own in dealing with the crisis that was building around her. That night, she made a decision that would change everything. She went to the prison section of the ship and used her royal authority to override the security systems. She found Jake sitting in his cell, staring out the small window at the stars beyond. When she appeared at his cell door, Jake felt the same electric shock he had experienced during their first meeting. But this time, instead of fear, he felt a strange sense of coming home. Princess Zara looked at him through the energy barrier that kept him imprisoned, and he could see uncertainty and fear in her purple eyes. She told him about the eternal bond and the prophecies. She explained about the danger they were both in, and the impossible choice they had to make. Jake listened without interrupting, and when she finished speaking, he was quiet for a long time. Finally, Jake told her that he had been thinking about the visions all day. He said that even though they seemed impossible, they felt more real than anything else in his life. He admitted that being near her made him feel complete in a way he had never experienced before. Princess Zara felt relief flow through her when she heard his words. But Jake also told her about his own fears and doubts. He was a human warrior, and his duty was to his own people. How could he bond with someone from the enemy side? What would that mean for the war and for all the humans who were still fighting and dying? The princess understood his concerns because she had the same ones about her own people. They stood there looking at each other through the prison barrier, and both realized that they were facing a choice that would affect not just their own lives, but the future of both their civilizations. Dr. Carter found them there an hour later when she came to check on Jake's condition. She took one look at the two of them staring at each other and immediately understood what was happening. Her scanner readings showed that their quantum signatures were becoming more aligned by the minute. Whatever they decided to do, they needed to decide it soon before the choice was taken away from them. The three of them talked quietly through the night about the impossible situation they were in. None of them had answers, but they all agreed that something extraordinary was happening that was bigger than any of them had imagined. By morning, they would have to face Prince Corvin and the High Council and somehow find a way to survive what was coming next. Prince Corvin struck before dawn while most of the ship was still quiet. He had spent the night gathering loyal guards and convincing key members of the High Council that Princess Zara had been compromised by human influence. His plan was simple and brutal. Execute both the princess and the human prisoner before anyone could stop him. The prince had underestimated how many Valerians were loyal to Princess Zara. Captain Ryan Brooks and the other human prisoners had also been making their own plans during the long months of captivity. They had noticed that some of the younger Valerian guards seemed uncomfortable with the war and the treatment of prisoners. Lieutenant Amy Walsh had been particularly good at making contact with these sympathetic guards. When Prince Corvin's forces moved toward the prison section, they found resistance they had not expected. A group of Valerian guards led by Commander Kess stood blocking their path. These guards believed in the ancient prophecies and thought that the eternal bond might be the key to ending the war between their species. The confrontation turned violent. Quickly, energy weapons fired down the curved hallways of the great ship. Alarms began sounding throughout all sections. Princess Zara heard the noise and knew immediately what was happening. Her uncle had decided to take power by force. Jake felt the danger through his growing connection with Princess Zara even before the sounds of fighting reached his cell. The bond between them was getting stronger every hour, and he could sense her fear and determination. When she appeared at his cell door carrying weapons and tools to free him, he was already ready to fight. Princess Zara released Jake from his chains and handed him a Valerian energy rifle. The weapon felt strange in his human hands, but his enhanced reflexes adapted to it quickly. She also gave him body armor that molded itself to fit his smaller human frame. The technology was beyond anything he had seen before, but somehow he knew exactly how to use it. They fought their way through the prison section side by side. Jake's human combat training combined with his new telepathic awareness made him incredibly dangerous. He could sense enemies before he saw them and react to threats that Princess Zara detected with her more advanced mental powers. Together, they moved through the ship like a single deadly organism. Dr. Carter had been hiding in her laboratory when the fighting started, but she came out when she saw Jake and Princess Zara running past her door. She brought her portable scanner and several pieces of medical equipment. Her readings showed that the bond between Jake and the princess was accelerating rapidly due to the stress and danger they were sharing. The three of them reached the other, human prisoners and found Captain Brooks and Lieutenant Walsh already fighting alongside their Valerian allies. The mixed group had managed to secure several key areas of the ship, but Prince Corvin controlled the main command centers and most of the heavy weapons. Jake quickly took charge of the human fighters while Princess Zara coordinated with the loyal Valerian guards. Their combined leadership was more effective than either could have achieved alone. The tactical awareness Jake had gained through the bond let him make battle plans that took advantage of Valerian technology, while Princess Zara's telepathic abilities allowed instant communication across their scattered forces. The fighting was fierce, but the tide began to turn in their favor. Prince Corvin's supporters were mostly motivated by ambition and fear, while Jake and Princess Zara's allies were fighting for something they believed in. The difference showed in every battle. During a brief pause in the fighting, Dr. Carter made a discovery that changed everything. Her deep scans of Jake and Princess Zara revealed that the eternal bond was not just connecting two individuals. When fully activated, it would create a psychic network that could link entire groups of people from both species. Lisa explained that if Jake and Princess Zara completed their bond willingly, it would allow humans and Valerians to share thoughts and emotions directly. The misunderstandings and fear that had caused the war between their peoples could be replaced with true communication and understanding. But she also warned them that completing the bond would require them to sacrifice their individual identities and become something new together. They would still be Jake and Zara, but they would also be part of a larger consciousness that belonged to both species and neither. Jake looked at Princess Zara and saw his own thoughts reflected in her purple eyes. They both understood that this was the choice the ancient prophecies had spoken of, not just whether to live or die, but whether to become the bridge that could unite their peoples or remain separate and let the war continue. The moment of decision came when Prince Corvin's forces launched their final assault. They had managed to gain control of the ship's main weapons and were threatening to destroy entire sections where Jake and Princess Zara's supporters were trapped. Hundreds of lives hung in the balance. Princess Zara took Jake's hand, and they looked into each other's eyes. Without speaking aloud, they both made their choice. The connection between them exploded outward in a wave of psychic energy that swept through the entire ship. Every human and Valerian on board suddenly found themselves sharing emotions and memories with members of the other species. The fear and hatred that had driven the war were replaced by understanding and empathy. Humans felt the Valerian love of beauty and harmony. Valerians experienced human determination and creativity. Prince Corvin's assault faltered as his soldiers found themselves unable to fire on enemies who no longer seemed like strangers. The shared consciousness created by the completed bond made it impossible to see members of the other species as something to be destroyed. Jake and Princess Zara stood at the center of the psychic storm that was transforming everyone around them. The individual people they had been were still there, but they had become something larger and more complete. They were Jake Harrison, the human warrior, and Princess Zara of the Valerian Empire, but they were also the living symbol of unity between their peoples. The transformation was not easy. Both of them had to learn how to maintain their separate identities, while sharing a consciousness that belonged to both of them. Jake found himself thinking in Valerian concepts that had no human equivalent. Princess Zara began to dream in human languages she had never learned. Captain Brooks and Lieutenant Walsh were among the first humans to adapt to the new psychic network. They found themselves working seamlessly with their Valerian counterparts, in ways that would have been impossible before. The barriers of language and culture that had seemed so important suddenly became minor obstacles that could be easily overcome. Dr. Carter studied the effects of the completed bond with fascination and wonder. Her instruments showed that Jake and Princess Zara had literally become a new form of life that combined the best qualities of both species. Their enhanced abilities were already spreading to others through the psychic network. Prince Corvin tried to rally his remaining supporters by claiming that the bond was a form of human mental control, but his words had no power when everyone could feel the truth directly through the shared consciousness. The unity that Jake and Princess Zara had created was real and voluntary and beautiful, in ways that no one had imagined possible. The fighting ended not with victory for either side, but with understanding that made conflict pointless. human prisoners, found themselves embraced by Valerian guards who had become friends through the psychic connection. Valerian soldiers who had lost family members to human attacks discovered that grief shared was grief lessened. But Jake and Princess Zara knew that their transformation was just the beginning. The bond had saved the people on this one ship, but the war between their species was still raging across dozens of star systems. They would have to find a way to spread the unity they had created to both civilizations before it was too late. Emperor Thane's fleet appeared on the edge of the star system just as the last of the fighting ended. The Emperor had received emergency messages about his brother's coup attempt and had rushed back with every ship he could gather. What he found when he boarded his flagship was beyond anything he could have expected. His daughter stood before him hand in hand with a human warrior and surrounded by a mixed group of humans and Valerians who looked at each other with expressions of friendship and respect. The psychic energy radiating from Jake and Princess Zara was so strong that Emperor Thane could feel it, even though he was not part of the bond network. Princess Zara stepped forward and explained everything that had happened. She told her father about the eternal bond and the choice she had made. She showed him through the psychic connection how the unity between species could end the war and create something better than either civilization had achieved alone. Emperor Thane listened to his daughter and looked into the eyes of the human warrior who had become her bonded partner. He saw strength and honor and a deep love for the princess that transcended all differences of species or culture. Most importantly, he saw hope for a future where the war between their peoples could finally end. Emperor Thane spent 3 days studying what had happened aboard his flagship before making any decisions. He spoke privately with Jake and Princess Zara and experienced the psychic bond firsthand. He interviewed the human prisoners and his own Valerian crew members who had been affected by the consciousness network. Most importantly, he consulted with Oracle Myra about the ancient prophecies and their meaning. The old woman confirmed what the Emperor suspected. The eternal bond between his daughter and the human warrior was exactly what the oldest texts had predicted. A bridge between species that would either bring peace or destroy both civilizations depending on how it was handled. The choice was no longer whether to accept what had happened, but how to use it wisely. Jake was struggling with the changes in his own mind and body. The bond with Princess Zara had given him abilities that no human had ever possessed, but it had also made him something that was no longer entirely human. He could feel the thoughts and emotions of every person connected to their network. Sometimes the mental noise was so overwhelming that he had to lock himself away just to think clearly. Princess Zara was having similar difficulties. Her telepathic powers had been amplified far beyond anything in Valerian history. But the constant input from dozens of minds made it hard to maintain her individual identity. She found herself adopting human thought patterns and emotional responses that felt foreign to her Valerian nature. Dr. Carter worked tirelessly to understand and document the transformation. Her research showed that Jake and Princess Zara were evolving into something unprecedented. Their brain structures were changing to accommodate new types of consciousness. Their bodies were adapting to handle psychic energies that would have killed normal members of either species. Most fascinating to Lisa was how the bond was spreading to others. Humans and Valerians who spent time near Jake and Princess Zara began developing limited telepathic connections with each other. The effect was gradual and voluntary, but it suggested that the unity between species could eventually extend to entire populations. Captain Brooks had become one of the strongest secondary nodes in the network. His military experience and natural leadership abilities made him an ideal coordinator for mixed human and Valerian teams. Lieutenant Walsh discovered that her connection with Valerian navigator Kess allowed them to pilot ships with impossible precision by sharing their different perspectives on space and time. Emperor Thane decided to test the bond's potential by sending mixed crews on dangerous missions into contested areas of space. Jake and Princess Zara led the first expedition to a human colony that was under siege by Valerian forces. The results were remarkable and terrifying. The bonded couple appeared in the middle of the battle, and their psychic field immediately began affecting everyone within several miles. Human defenders found themselves understanding the motivations and fears of their Valerian attackers. Valerian soldiers experienced human determination and love for their families and homes. Fighting stopped within hours as members of both sides realized they had more in common than they had ever imagined. The siege turned into negotiations and then into cooperation as humans and Valerians worked together to rebuild the damaged colony. Jake and Princess Zara had proven that their bond could end conflicts, but they had also shown how powerful and potentially dangerous their influence could be. Word of what had happened spread quickly through both civilizations. Some people saw Jake and Princess Zara as saviors who could finally bring peace to the galaxy. Others viewed them as a threat to the natural order of things. Fear and hope battled in the hearts of humans and Valerians across dozens of star systems. The Valerian High Council was deeply divided about how to respond. Half the members wanted to use Jake and Princess Zara's abilities to win the war quickly. The other half worried that the bond represented a fundamental change in Valerian nature that could destroy their ancient culture. Several council members demanded that Princess Zara be stripped of her royal status for bonding with a human. Human political leaders were equally conflicted. Some saw the bond as humanity's secret weapon against the Valerian Empire. Others feared that Jake had been corrupted by alien influence and could no longer be trusted to represent human interests. Military commanders worried about soldiers who might refuse to fight after experiencing Valerian thoughts and emotions. Jake and Princess Zara found themselves at the center of political storms on both sides. They received messages offering them unlimited power if they would use their abilities to crush their enemies. They also received death threats from people who saw them as traitors to their own species. The pressure was enormous, but the bond between them provided strength that neither could have found alone. When Jake felt overwhelmed by the responsibility they carried, Princess Zara's calm Valerian wisdom helped center him. When she struggled with doubt about their path, his human determination reminded her of why they had made their choice. Emperor Thane made the decision that changed everything. Instead of trying to control or limit Jake and Princess Zara, he gave them his full support. He announced to the Valerian Empire that his daughter's bond with a human warrior was a gift from the ancient powers and should be celebrated rather than feared. The Emperor's proclamation split the Valerian Empire. Systems loyal to the royal family accepted Jake as Princess Zara's bonded partner and began working toward peace with humanity. Other regions declared independence rather than accept a half-human heir to the throne. The unity Jake and Princess Zara represented came at the cost of civil war among the Valerians. Similar divisions appeared in human space. Colonies that had experienced the bond's effects firsthand supported Jake and Princess Zara's mission of peace. Military strongholds and systems that had suffered heavily in the war rejected any cooperation with Valerians. Humanity began to fracture along the same lines as the Valerian Empire. Jake realized that their bond had not solved the conflict between their peoples, but had transformed it into something more complex. Instead of one war between two species, there were now multiple conflicts between those who accepted unity and those who rejected it. Princess Zara saw the same pattern and understood that they had reached a critical point. The psychic network they had created was spreading, but it was also creating resistance that could lead to even greater violence. They needed to find a way to demonstrate the benefits of unity without forcing it on anyone who was not ready. Dr. Carter provided the answer they were looking for. Her research had discovered that the bond's effects were strongest when people experienced genuine cooperation and mutual benefit. Simply forcing humans and Valerians to share thoughts was not enough. They had to want to work together for the connection to become permanent and positive. Jake and Princess Zara began a new approach. Instead of trying to end conflicts directly, they focused on creating opportunities for voluntary cooperation. They established joint colonies where humans and Valerians could live and work together by choice. They organized combined exploration, missions to discover new worlds and resources that both species could share. The results were slower but more lasting than their previous efforts. Humans and Valerians, who chose to participate in mixed communities, developed strong bonds that enhanced their abilities and enriched their lives. Children born to mixed couples displayed capabilities that neither species had ever possessed. Captain Brooks and Lieutenant Walsh became leaders of the first joint military unit. Human tactical flexibility combined with Valerian strategic thinking created a force that was more effective than anything either species had produced separately. Their success inspired similar formations throughout the regions that supported unity. But the transformation was not without costs. Jake found that his human identity was becoming diluted as he absorbed more Valerian perspectives through the bond. Princess Zara discovered that her Valerian emotional control was breaking down as she experienced human passion and spontaneity. Both of them had to learn new ways of being that preserved their individual natures while embracing their shared consciousness. It was a delicate balance that required constant attention and mutual support. Sometimes they succeeded in remaining distinct people who happened to share thoughts. Other times they merged so completely that their separate identities almost disappeared. Dr. Carter documented every aspect of their ongoing transformation. Her records showed that Jake and Princess Zara were becoming something entirely new while still remaining recognizably themselves. They were the first members of a potential new species that combined the best qualities of humans and Valerians. Emperor Thane watched his daughter's evolution with a mixture of pride and sadness. He was proud of what she had accomplished and the peace she was bringing to the galaxy, but he also mourned the loss of the Valerian princess he had raised and loved. The being she was becoming was wonderful, but it was not entirely his daughter anymore. Jake felt similar emotions from his human friends and colleagues. They respected what he had become and were grateful for the peace he was creating. But they also grieved for the purely human warrior they had known and followed into battle. The man he was becoming was greater than his former self, but he was also something they could not fully understand as the transformation continued. 5 years had passed since the eternal bond first connected Jake Harrison and Princess Zara. The galaxy was a very different place than it had been during the dark days of the war. Mixed colonies flourished on dozens of worlds. Joint human and Valerian fleets explored regions of space that neither species could have reached alone. Children who carried the heritage of both civilizations were growing up in a universe their parents could barely have imagined. The wedding ceremony took place aboard Unity Station. The massive structure had been built jointly by human and Valerian engineers using technologies that both species contributed. It orbited a beautiful blue star in neutral space, halfway between Earth and the Valerian home system. Representatives from hundreds of worlds came to witness the marriage of the couple who had changed the destiny of 2 civilizations. Jake wore a uniform that combined human military tradition with Valerian ceremonial elements. The deep blue fabric was woven with silver threads that caught the light and seemed to glow with their own energy. Princess Zara's wedding dress flowed like liquid starlight and changed colors as she moved through the spectrum from pure white to deep purple to brilliant gold. Captain Brooks stood beside Jake as his best man, while Dr. Carter had become one of Princess Zara's closest advisors and friends. Lieutenant Walsh and Valerian navigator Kess had married 6 months earlier in the first official human-Valerian wedding ceremony. Their partnership had proven that the bond between species could take many forms and did not require the mystical connection that Jake and Princess Zara shared. The ceremony itself blended traditions from both cultures in ways that honored their differences while celebrating their unity. Valerian priests spoke ancient words about souls finding their eternal partners, while human officials administered vows about love and commitment that transcended all boundaries. When Jake and Princess Zara kissed to seal their marriage, the psychic energy that radiated from them touched every person present. Emperor Thane gave his blessing to the union with words that were broadcast across both civilizations. He spoke about the courage required to choose love over fear and unity over division. His acceptance of Jake as his son-in-law helped convince many Valerians who had been uncertain about the bond between species. The Earth government sent Admiral Kate Morgan as their official representative. She had initially been skeptical about Jake's transformation, but had become one of the strongest supporters of the peace process after visiting several mixed colonies. Her presence at the wedding showed that humanity was ready to embrace a future that included partnership with the Valerians. The celebration lasted for 3 days and included demonstrations of the amazing things that humans and Valerians could accomplish together. Mixed teams of engineers unveiled new faster-than-light drive systems that neither species could have developed alone. Scientists presented research on planetary terraforming that could create garden worlds throughout the galaxy. Artists displayed works that combined human creativity with Valerian harmony in ways that moved viewers to tears. But the most remarkable demonstration was the children. Dozens of young people who carried both human and Valerian heritage performed feats that amazed even their parents. They could communicate telepathically across vast distances. They displayed physical abilities that exceeded both parent species. Most importantly, they seemed to naturally understand and love beings from many different worlds without the fear and prejudice that had caused so much conflict. Jake and Princess Zara watched these children with wonder and hope. They represented the future that the eternal bond had made possible. A future where the differences between species became strengths rather than sources of conflict. A future where the galaxy could be united not through conquest, but through understanding and cooperation. The honeymoon took Jake and Princess Zara to the edge of known space aboard a ship crewed entirely by bonded pairs from both species. They explored star systems that had never been visited and discovered worlds of incredible beauty. On one planet covered with crystal forests that sang in harmony with the wind, they established the first joint research station dedicated to studying the bond between species and its potential for creating even greater unity. Dr. Carter led the research team and made discoveries that revolutionized understanding of consciousness and evolution. She found that the bond between Jake and Princess Zara was continuing to evolve and strengthen. Their connection now extended across any distance and allowed them to share not just thoughts and emotions but actual memories and experiences. More importantly, Lisa discovered that the bond was beginning to affect people who had never met Jake and Princess Zara directly. Humans and Valerians throughout the galaxy were developing spontaneous telepathic connections with members of the other species. The unity that had begun with two individuals was spreading to become a transformation of both civilizations. The changes were not without challenges. Some humans worried that they were losing their essential humanity as they gained Valerian mental abilities. Some Valerians feared that human emotions and impulses were making them less wise and controlled. Both species had to learn new ways of being that preserved their unique qualities while embracing their expanding consciousness. Jake found himself becoming a bridge between the fears and hopes of both peoples. His human origin made him trusted by humans who worried about Valerian influence. His bond with Princess Zara and his enhanced abilities proved to Valerians that humans could adapt and grow beyond their original limitations. Princess Zara played a similar role in reverse. Her Valerian heritage gave her credibility with those who valued ancient wisdom and tradition. Her love for Jake and her understanding of human nature showed that unity between species did not require abandoning everything that made each civilization special. Together they traveled throughout both human and Valerian space, establishing new colonies and research centers. Their presence seemed to accelerate the bonding process, and everywhere they went, conflicts between the species decreased while cooperation increased. They became living symbols of the peace and unity that was slowly transforming the galaxy. 10. Years after their wedding, Jake and Princess Zara stood on the observation deck of Unity Station and looked out at a view that filled them with pride and amazement. Hundreds of ships from dozens of worlds moved peacefully through the space around the station. Human vessels with their angular efficiency flew in formation with graceful Valerian cruisers. New ship designs that combined technologies from both civilizations represented the growing unity between the species. Their own children played in the gardens below with friends whose heritage spanned multiple star systems. The young people displayed abilities that even Jake and Princess Zara found remarkable. They could communicate with dolphins in Earth's oceans and understand the crystalline life forms found on Valerian worlds. They seemed to naturally love all forms of consciousness and treat every being as family. Captain Brooks had become Admiral Brooks and commanded the first integrated fleet in galactic history. His ships explored the farthest reaches of space and made contact with new civilizations that were amazed by the cooperation they witnessed between humans and Valerians. Several alien species had already requested to join the growing alliance of United Worlds. Lieutenant Walsh and her husband Kess had established the first academy for training bonded pairs in leadership and diplomacy. Students came from throughout the galaxy to learn how different species could work together effectively. Their graduates served as ambassadors and administrators in the growing network of mixed colonies and research stations. Dr. Carter had become the leading expert on consciousness, evolution, and the bond between species. Her research showed that Jake and Princess Zara's connection was just the beginning of a transformation that could eventually unite all intelligent life in the galaxy. She predicted that within a few generations, the ability to form psychic bonds would become natural for most humans and Valerians. Emperor Thane had lived to see his grandchildren grow up in a universe of peace and cooperation. On his deathbed, he told Jake and Princess Zara that they had given him the greatest gift any parent could receive. They had made a future where his descendants would never know the pain and loss of war between species. The old emperor's final words were about the courage required to choose love over fear. He said that Jake and Princess Zara had shown both their peoples that unity was not weakness, but the greatest strength any civilization could possess. Their bond had proved that differences between species were meant to be celebrated rather than feared. As Jake and Princess Zara watched the sunset paint the space around Unity Station, in brilliant colors they reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had begun with a human warrior in chains and an alien princess trying to read his mind. It had grown into a love that transcended species and transformed civilizations. The bond between them continued to strengthen and evolve with each passing year. They were no longer just Jake Harrison and Princess Zara, but something greater than either could have become alone. They were the living proof that love could overcome any obstacle, and that unity between different peoples was not just possible, but inevitable when beings chose understanding over fear. Their children,